We're back again with another episode of Contractor's Corner with Jake Carter and myself, Johnny Vecchio. Today we're excited to introduce a special guest. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Melvin Newman of Patabid. Patabid Quantify is a game-changing estimating software that promises to redefine the estimating process for electrical and mechanical contractors. And I believe it goes even farther than that. Melvin, how are you?
Yeah, doing really well. It's a crazy kickoff to the week, but we're hitting it strong.
I'd love for you to give us a little bit of a background of what you've been up to.
Oh man, okay. Depends how far down the rabbit hole you want to go, but yeah. So I'm a 15-year construction estimator, really focused on the MEP trades. A couple of years ago, well, I guess back in 2017, kicked off Patabid and really with a focus on the front end of construction business, like the estimating and pre-con side of things. And ran it basically as a hobby. It was really just, to throw some stuff that I had built to automate my own job out on the market and kind of see what happened. And by the end of 2021, it had started to gain traction and people were really interested and things were going a little bit nuts. So I had to make that kind of existential decision on whether I wanted to die from, overwork or, decide what I wanted to be when I grew up. And so quit the day job and moved into full-time running Patabid, and we deployed our estimating platform at that time. And really the focus is bringing AI into the pre-construction with a real focus on the MEP side, and then a little bit of risk analysis on kind of the GC side of things. So that's really kind of where Patabid fits into the marketplace and what our core game is in Contact.
I love that. I'll jump in here. One of the things, when we first met, that was pretty clear. I think we both hold the same viewpoints. Is just how important it is to get the estimate right, and like how much of an impact it has throughout. In any project, big, small, infrastructure, $160 million right down to your smallest bids. And one of the things that we talk to our audience about, and I talk a lot about, is just the process of estimating. How going through it again, it being complex or simple, it is the outcome of the job 90% of the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you don't get that first step right and you don't have a system in place, and if anything you're going to systemize, it's going to be that. We do it so frequently.
Mm-hmm.
But how many contractors you've seen and I've seen that are unable to take that job beyond the estimate into production and actually
Mm-hmm.
learn from mistakes and actually, eventually not make the mistakes. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that.
Oh man. The number one thing that throws me for a loop, or just, one of my pet peeves is lessons learned. We got to stop learning lessons and we have to start applying them. Like the reality is, we keep these binders of lessons learned on all our projects, and then they just collect dust. I actually snapped in a meeting once. It was after a particularly bad project ended at one of the massive GCs that I work for. And the ops team was sitting there like, oh, we've got these forms to fill out these lessons learned, and we got to detail, everything. And I'm like, guys, like I guarantee you 10 copies of this form with, the exact points you're going to say are sitting in binders all over this office that we never open up. I'm like, stop, learning lessons and actually start applying them. And like you said there, it really all starts at the estimate stage. And if you screw up the estimate, you're screwed.
For sure.
This is what I think a lot of contractors miss. Like, a lot of contractors focus on the midpoint of the project, the execution, which is the longest part of the project. Like you're gonna spend 4 to 6 weeks bidding a project, but it's going to be running for 2 to 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone focuses on that, execution. They're like, yeah, we got to standardize this. And I'm sitting there, I'm saying, guys, you're standardizing the midpoint. But if you botch that estimate it doesn't matter how fantastic your processes and procedures are, you are screwed. And, you know, you might be able to get it up to a net zero if you are particularly good or lucky. But the reality is, if you screw up that estimate badly, that project is sunk before you hit go. And no amount of standardization midstream is going to help you. So you really have to standardize that very front end first. And what's crazy is it's probably about the easiest one to standardize. You know, it's the right place to start because it's the easiest. And if you get it right, everything flows from there anyway. Like what people don't necessarily realize is every single incident that you're going to have on a project, you know, every safety incident, every financial risk, every financial failure is committed to in that estimate. When you submit that bid, you are locked in for the duration of that project. So if you don't get that right, and I've seen some contractors, you know, they bring in, you know, a brand new kid, fresh grad, and they say, congrats, you're now the estimator and you'll work your way up to being a PM. And I'm always terrified when I interface with those kind of contractors because I'm like, guys, you are literally putting the very existential future of your company in the hands of a fresh grad. No, you should start them as the PM and they should work their way up to estimating. Because if you botch that, you are fully and totally screwed. And for me, like I've in my personal career, I've won everything from a $30,000. My goalposts are a $30,000 compressor changeout and a $250 million full plant retrofit. Those are kind of like and everything in between. And what always kind of struck me was the risks don't change. It doesn't matter how big or how small you are. It just matters whether you show up in the news or not. Like if you're a, you know, home, you know, custom home builder, you know, small guy, whatever, and you screw up a job by 30% and you go bankrupt. I got to be honest, that's probably not going to move the needle anywhere. If you're a massive GC and you screw up by 30% and go bankrupt, well, now thousands of people are out of a job. That's just going to make the news. But that's literally the only difference. Like in both cases, you're done. And it started at the estimate. And a lot of it is around that risk analysis. You know, what does the schedule mean? When does this happen? Like, you know, a 6-month schedule that happens, you know, mid-year is totally different from one that goes over the winter, even though it's the same number of days. Liquidated damages, what do those mean? And did the owner specifically put out an impossible schedule so that they could benefit from liquidated damages? I've seen that.
Guaranteed.
And yeah, so like there's so much in there to unpack on that front end piece, but that's really the key. If you get it wrong there, it doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to achieve success at the end.
Right. So a lot of the experience I've had with you know, estimating gone wrong is also sales gone wrong, is production gone wrong. And I can't tell you, like, usually when we do a lot of turnaround consulting, we go into companies and a lot of what we do is looking at their watch and telling them what time it is. And it never shocks me that doesn't matter the size of the company. All right. If I want to know what happened, where the problem came from, all right, I start the same process segment. Okay, show me your bid. Let's take this bid apart. Now, project manager, you stand over there. All right, estimator, salesperson, you explain to me how this job was supposed to go. All right, project manager, you come over here and you tell me how the job went. And there's always a disconnect. There's always like they were speaking different languages and they were on different planets. And again, what ends up happening, and I see the most of, is the lack of accountability between that handoff, between taking a job. And I think a lot of it, you know, again, obviously things are complex, but I think a lot of it is avoidable. I think a lot of it is, you know, how do we take a cost code, all right, and have a team to understand it? How do we have a cost code that means something that isn't forever variable, where, again, people are scratching their head on, like, well, you know, what is the target? What is the objective behind this code or this, you know, in this place? And again, I think that, the industry as a whole, and where I see kind of the biggest opportunities in that communication side. It's
Yes.
explaining, it's being able to ask an AI like, hey, help me understand this. Give me another point of view that isn't the estimator who've been warring with each other, because you get two human beings in the same room and it's just finger pointing. That's all it ever seems to be, right? So, like, I mean, I've seen it where the owner of the company is pointing at his staff's pointing back at him, but you guys just took $100,000 loss. Like, does it really matter? Like, how did you get in this situation? The best way to avoid the situation is not to put yourself in it, like, in the first place. And again, I mean, now I'm going to get on my soapbox here, but a lot of contractors, and I'm going to talk more the smaller guys, but they don't recognize what management accounting is versus, regulatory accounting systems, and what that communication is, and where those handoffs have to be. The other thing I'm sure you've seen a lot of times is, project managers that are, and estimators that are constantly at war.
Always.
Right? And refuse to talk to each other, refuse to communicate. And lo and behold, we have these issues that we never learn from, or that they continue to be repeated over and over again. So talk to me a little bit about where you see kind of the future line, because I see, almost a mediator that's going to emerge from all of this. And again, when you have 1,200 pieces of paperwork, even you take the smallest house that's being built. I mean, you can have 60 pages of plans, right? You can have specs. You can have, I think where AI is going to come in is really taking those lessons learned and making them real, right? And using that data that, that I think human beings miss.
You're heading into a really interesting side of things here. And I was just talking about this on last Friday, actually. And where does AI fit in all of this? So you've hit the one nail on the head. Communication is everything. The other thing that gets in the way is our own biases, our own, kind of, we call it our intuition and, our gut feeling and all this kind of stuff. And the one thing about AI that it sort of has, okay, so there's two different things here. There's that gut feeling and the intuition side of things. AIs can develop a loose intuition on how things go together. That is something that they are capable of. What they can never develop is that gut feeling.
Right.
And if you train them properly on, unbiased data, or you can remove as much of the bias as possible, the one thing that an AI will always give you is an answer. And that answer will be cold, hard, calculated. It won't feel good or bad about that answer because it doesn't have a feeling. It will have a bit of an intuition about it, but it won't have a feeling. Like, it won't say, I feel good about this, let's go get it. It will never look at that big Hail Mary job and say, yeah. It will look at it as like, what does it actually mean? Have you done work for this client before?
Right.
Have you done successful work for this client, which is always the second question.
Right.
And where did that come from? Where did it go? And so that is one key area where AIs can become fantastic at that risk mitigation. They can learn better than we can from the data where successes and failures are. We did an exercise at one of the first company I started at in my career, where it was the head of the estimate department and I sat down, and the PMs have been coming to us and saying, like, we got to work for these clients and ditch these other ones over here. And so we sat down, we're like, okay, let's see what this actually means. And it took us a while, but we pulled all the data out and we went through everything. And it turned out that the clients that the PMs really tended to dislike the most always paid us on time, always paid us what we were asking, never nickel and dimed us.
Yeah.
And the ones that the PMs tended to love working with were screwing us every single time. So we actually went back to the ops side of the building and basically said, yeah, sorry, no, we're actually going to get more work with the people you don't like working with and less work with the guys that are actually screwing us but doing it while smiling. And so, but AIs can start to continuously provide that. That took us like 2 weeks to pull that data together.
Right.
An AI can operate on that far faster.
Right.
And it can give you that calculated answer far faster. It doesn't mean it's smarter. This is a key thing to understand about AIs. Just because they operate fast doesn't mean they're actually smart. Like if you look at ChatGPT there, it will never start a conversation with you. It is actually incapable of thought. It takes input, and that's what triggers some of the most fantastic algorithms made by man. But it has to be triggered on the data. So AIs, like at their core, they're not thinking machines per se. They're really, really fast at pulling data together, connecting the dots on all of that, and giving you cold hard answers. That's the beauty of them. So I don't think in any way that they're going to replace the human in the loop, but they are going to dramatically accelerate that.
Right.
So as schedules on, especially on estimating, what's just crazy is, again, going back to, you have 4 to 6 weeks to bid that 2 to 3 year long project. Like how do you achieve that? That is where AIs can step in and start to take the grind out of there. The time suck of doing a lot of that quantification side of things, and enable you to do things at a higher level, negotiate better pricing, that kind of stuff. And they can start to give you that red, yellow, green on, is this going to be a good, bad, or ugly project?
Right.
And that's really where they start to step in on doing those things we miss.
And see, that's where I see the biggest opportunity existing, even now, like immediately. Because let's face it, all right. Estimators are hard to come by. They're almost as hard to come by, like good estimators.
Good
I'm
ones,
not talking
yes.
about again, at the lower levels, there's plenty. But when we get into these big projects, specialty work, we get into things. You try and find somebody that has the intuition, someone that has the experience, someone that's able to foresee things. All right. Well, guess what? If you can afford to have them on your team, you've got one or two at best. Versus, what the demand is always far exceeded. Even in the best of times, it's always far exceeded the skills and the people that we had. So where I see the opportunity here is being able to bridge some of the gaps. So take a junior estimator, for example, right? And have him learn off the lessons that have already been learned, and take in a procedure, for example, right? Adding a procedure to an estimating process. And I mean, and I'll use a home builder as an example, right? There's so many nuances between. You look at any part of the project, there could be 5 or 6 different variables to it, right? For a new estimator, though, by the time they kind of work through and learn all those things, they're years into the career, right? So where do you get them onboarded? Where do you get them into the industry where they are productive in time and not losing the company money, not costing a skilled estimator all of his time to babysit? I think that that's where it's going to become an awesome tool, and that it's going to make, and we've seen it already being set up, that it's making sure the process is being followed. It's making sure that the steps and the variables have been thought about even ahead of time. And again, it's allowing the other people on the team to focus on what they have to focus on, and then we're doing a review, right? The other thing that I found that's already useful, like practical now, is just think about the amount of information that gets accumulated on a project, right? Think about the amount of text, conversations, like emails, everything else that goes into it. I mean, for somebody that's not quite up to speed, all right, all the liability, everything else that I've seen be taken on by, junior estimators, or all the yeses and mistakes that are getting made, feeding that back through, even using ChatGPT, at the lowest form, and really understanding, what occurred on this job, right? Remembering and having all that stuff so that there is tangible lessons to be learned. And I keep going back to that, but like you said, that these things can actually be put into action, right? That changes the way that we look at things. And again, if you think about it, it's like having a trainer for
Mhm.
for your staff member, which is incredibly, to me, it's got a lot of positive ability, even if it's not perfect, even if it's not
Oh,
bang on.
100%. And that's you're hitting on it there. It's it, it's not 100% perfect, but it's there to accelerate the person. And I really like what you're saying there. I see the future of this as that binder that I was saying that held all those lessons learned.
Mhm.
That binder is no longer on a shelf.
Right,
That binder is now interactive. That
right.
binder is actually able to monitor the estimating platform. It's
Mhm.
able to monitor the financial platform. It's able to connect those dots. And it's able to start to see when things are going sideways because of what it's learned,
Right.
because it's applying those lessons learned. It's able to see things far sooner than a stock person who's running 3 or 4 jobs and
Right.
just trying to keep ahead of things and still being asked to do some estimates on the side or do all the change orders. Like it gets
Or
out of control so fast.
right.
But that's exactly where AI steps in.
Right.
Like we have the one platform where everything started from. I was tasked with finding opportunities to bid on, like the very, very tip of the spear, but it was to cover all of Canada. And that's a pretty monstrous geographic area. It's way worse in the US because things are far more fractured than they are even in Canada. So build a system to go out and automate it because there's no way a human can do it. And that was really where it automates the collection, the reading of these things, and the bringing it to the front based on what you're looking for. And that's really where everything started for us. Um, and what it enabled was this AI is able to read through several thousand bid opportunities a night
Mhm.
and digest all of that down into something that the human can get an email in the morning from it that says, hey, here's the top picks that came out of yesterday.
Wow.
Right.
And it took literally, we clocked it. It took things from 18 hours a week on average down to 40 minutes. And it really, really, because it's that cold, hard calculus of the way it runs, it doesn't try to obscure anything. So it's going to be the same over and over and over
Right.
again. Um, and
That's an
so, I mean, they
opportunity
have
on its own.
limitations. It was hilarious because when COVID happened, COVID threw it for a loop because, again, the AI had no concept of what COVID was. And
Right.
then you had all of these opportunities coming out for, COVID paraphernalia, masks, gloves, suit, like the whole 10 yards of stuff coming out, COVID, COVID, COVID. So we had to spend some time retraining the AI over a couple of weeks on what COVID was so that it knew it wasn't something it had to spaz out about and it could start to see through that. But we had one of our clients that joined us on that platform a couple of years ago. They didn't even tell us they were doing this, but they benchmarked the client. The client benchmarked our AI against their entire BD team, and they had a 5-person business development team that covered basically central Western Canada, and they gave our AI platform to the secretary and the admin assistant. And by the end of they ran it for a week or two. It was a very short time. It was 2 weeks because that was what the trial was. And they came back to us and they basically said, "Okay, we're signing up now." And we're like, "Oh, okay, cool." And they're like, "Yeah, so here's what we did." And they're like, "That AI found 5 opportunities that the BD team missed."
Mm.
And the BD team found one that the AI missed. And they're like, and it was a 1 versus 5 scenario. So they're basically like, the secretary now manages all of this sourcing for us.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
It was
So,
awesome.
and I think we're going to see a lot more of that as AI really moves into our lives. Because listen, at the end of the
Yep.
day, think about it this way. I mean, we're going to be in a labor shortage. How many contractors do you know that are doing things they shouldn't be doing, that are taking on projects they shouldn't be doing, and where what it sounds like is that again, you can really start to skill match to the opportunity that's available out there and become more specialized. And again, like gone are the days where I think, where we've come from, where we have a large amount of relatively skilled people that can cover a lot of different things. The reality is we're hundreds of thousands of workers short. It's not, it's not, and me and Johnny talk about this all the time. The value system of the average contractor or average worker, I should say, has changed, right? So I'll give you an example. I'm a baby boomer, all right, a Gen Xer. Their value system is if you work hard, you will get somewhere, right? So you see these guys working 7 days a week, busting their gears to get things done. They were the pushers, the grinders, and that was their value system. Okay. Now we have a whole generation, and again, in order for us to solve the problems that we have in North America, which is building enough homes, all this other stuff, we need to be able to attract the people that are now the millennials down, right? Where their value system is completely different. It's if you show me an opportunity, then I'll work, right? Show me the opportunity first. Where I see AI really stepping into this and really owning this lane is think about it from this perspective. Number one is, can somebody in the future or very near future be trained to do a specific task, specific role very well with an AI? The answer is already yes. We've already doing this ourselves. So with that in mind, one of the biggest problems has always been is you've got this clash of people, right? Millennials, baby boomers have generally been and Gen Xers are sort of still in control. And then you have this whole other group of the untouchables, the ones that they don't even want to speak to half the time on the site and have all these problems with. And they're definitely, they were never trained. It was the shut up and work and if you work hard, right? So they all, no onboarding, no training, and then they just got thrown onto a job site and away they went, right? That's how everyone learned. Well, that time is gone, but it's gone because what we've seen in my own business and many other businesses is that if you want to attract a millennial or anybody with worth of salt, you better have a very good training plan versus 10, 15 years ago, nobody wanted training. No one was going to, learn new skills. Like they just did what they did, right? That was what they could get by with. But now the pathway has to be made. And the problem again is it comes down to resources. Where's all this knowledge going? Where's all this information that needs context added to it going to be? Yes. And I don't think we're seeing a transfer of that information being made between the two generations because there are different value systems. They're not. So again, I still see that the same old stuff exists in the same old parallels. Like, you've got an older guy that's, refusing to train the apprentice or does it in such a shitty way that he's just generated another, low volume, low productive employee, right? Or staff.
Well, that's a massive, that's a whole separate issue. That's really, really massive in the industry. Mentorship. Right. It was devalued in a whole generation of workers. And we really need to get back to that because, quite frankly, no human can live long enough to make all the mistakes themselves.
Right.
So you have to learn.
Right. Well, it's been a painful process for the Gen Xers and the Boomers, continuously trying to transfer all that knowledge down to the younger generation, only to have them leave or just drop off, and it's just disheartening, right?
And we're seeing it with project managers. We're seeing it all the way up to the executive levels as well, right? So I guess the classic example is you have a son and his father that are running a fair-sized contracting business, and believe me, I deal with this constantly, where they have a value difference in opinion. All right, one wants technology, one refuses it. And there's so many disconnects that lead to production problems, that lead to higher risk, that lead to not being able to adapt to everything that's going on, and again, where we're going to see. All of these things, including estimating, because to me, estimating is just as much a trade and a skill as anything that there is out there, right? And if you really have been in it long enough, like you just said, do you know how many mistakes can be made and what it costs? That really is the, that's the linchpin. So I think that in the future, what we're going to find, let's start with an estimator, is that they're going to have to come into an environment that will answer their questions,
Right.
that will be there with them 24/7, that they can feel confident about decisions that they're making that do have all this impact, right? And again, in terms of transferring information, it's not just transferring information, because the world is packed full of information. It's adding context to that information that matters, right? And that's what I'm seeing. The utility right now of an AI is that, hey, it's boring as hell to take a lesson from one, but at the end of the day, you can ask a question to it, and it's using the real data, and like you said, no feelings, no emotions, no bias,
and a perfect memory.
Right, and it's telling you. It's telling you what you need to know about that project. That's allowing for more decisions. It's allowing for people that otherwise wouldn't have been able to make those decisions or to have that information. And I think it's removing some of the gap that we have. And I feel like over the next few years, especially in the estimating side, and that's why we're having this discussion, is the gap is so wide right now. It's so overwhelming to think. Like, the States is short 3 million homes. I think we're 1.5 million short here in Canada. We're seeing skyrocketing. Like, no millennial can afford a house, right, in Canada. And it's all coming down to these problems, is how do we produce 3 times as much with half the resources? How do we do that? And
do it properly, profitably.
Right. That's the key. Profitably, efficiently, and I think that the answer is partially going to lie in, obviously we need to, as people, and as industry leaders, we need to evolve more. We need to figure out how to bring, because we don't, in my opinion, we don't have less people on the planet today than we did 10 years ago, do we? Okay, so why do we have a labor shortage? Why do we have something that's like this industry is so far behind? Like, think about the concept here. So far behind that it's causing every other industry, every other market to collapse around it.
Yep. We're at least 20 years behind.
No one's saying anything about it, but I'm seeing it vividly. I'm watching businesses that, again, are going to become obsolete, or they're going to be eliminated, and I'm seeing this whole, we know we need to build. We know we have massive infrastructures. We have massive things. What's stopping those projects from moving forward? It's lack of training. It's lack of context. It's lack of ability to fill the roles, right? So again, when we see AIs coming in, we talk about estimate. I can pinpoint many other use cases for it where it's going to eliminate that friction. It's going to eliminate that, that one person that it comes down to, that one estimator. You know what I mean? It's going to allow us to have, like you said, superhumans here. You still will always, in my opinion, need to have the human to operate, but you will need 10 less people that are useless and that don't belong in that space and should go get their job somewhere else, right?
Yeah. Like the tech infrastructure has been lagging behind for 20 years. It's been met with such resistance from the boomer generation. So there's zero infrastructure. There's all this data. There's no way of processing it, no way of making any use of it. And now we're finally starting to install all these systems in. And no wonder the younger generation's not interested. Are you kidding me? They grew up on social media. They have there's nothing the construction industry has. It's so slow. It's so painful.
It is pivoting a little bit, like with the advent of VDC and virtual design construct, that kind of stuff. It is getting more attractive, I'll say. Like they're realizing that construction has to evolve from being down in the dirt to a little more finesse, that sort of thing. And it's literally because there's no choice. Like the projects themselves are becoming so complex also that you have to fit these out, and the schedules are getting so compressed. You have to start to take this into account. Like you go and try to build a skyscraper, downtown Toronto, downtown New York, downtown Vancouver. Like the complexities of that can no longer be managed by just showing up with a measuring tape.
Right.
You have to know what you're doing before you do it. You walk into a nuclear plant, they predefine every step you're going to take before you take it, and then run you through it at least 10 times. before you do it. And so these things are moving contact into the technological present. And AI is becoming such a huge necessity for all of the front end of the business here that it's interesting that AI is probably getting applied, outside of big data, if you will. Like one of the, grassroots application of AI right now is in construction. And it's what you were saying there, Johnny, the sheer amount of data that these companies have built up over years that is barely digestible. It's, a giant steaming pile of manure. But that's something that AIs are really good at bringing order to.
Right.
It's the only way it would have ever happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
100%. The only way it would have ever happened. Yeah.
So again, and in terms of being attractive, see, I think that in 3 years' time, less than 3 years, you mark my words now, they're going to be talking about like flexes of like you should go get a contracting, job in contracting because the pay is there.
Yep.
And here's the other thing: once we remove all of these, communication problems and all these onboarding problems, all these other, barriers for people to be successful. So again, you think about it, like there's a difference between going to school and university, which everyone was told, all right, to become a doctor and going through that process, right? A difference between there's order, there's steps, there's placements. Where in construction is like, okay, it's day by day, like moment by moment kind of thing. And where I think we lost the millennials and where we lost everyone down is that, hey, we didn't recognize what they're really good at. Millennials are very good at collaborating. They're very good at using technology to advance with. They're very good at problem solving. They're, in genuine, like they genuinely want to be trained and want to have career advancements, right? And again, I'm seeing the opportunity here is that we're not going to be attracting the dropouts and the people that didn't want anything to do with, school and all that kind of stuff. We're going to find a lot more people that were, maybe destined for the corporate world coming into construction. And we're seeing that already. We're seeing the big money coming in and showing interest. In, the corporate or the hedge funds has been a big eye opener for us, and what AI is going to do to the whole industry. Because we're seeing hedge funds come in and make ridiculous offers to buy 5, 6, 7, 8 blue collar businesses in the area, and you know what they're after. They're coming for that data. They're coming for that consumer behavior. And again, it's only a matter of time before we're sitting on $1 billion contractor because they have now something there that can add the glue to make all these things work. Right? Before they did it, it relied on people. And when you rely on people, especially, and I'm not going to say undereducated because some of the smartest people I know are tradesmen, but, there was definitely a misunderstanding of how we apply that. How do we use it and have it benefit, a wide variety of projects and people, right? Where it's been very much, if you have it, you have it. If you don't, you're screwed, right? So I think that's where we're going to see a big change and making the industry more attractive. Hopefully, it's quicker than we anticipate. But I mean, AI is moving lightning fast, and I've seen it picked up big time in construction. I mean, here at Contractor AI, obviously, we stand for a lot of bringing on these new technologies and helping contractors adapt to them, because that's really the biggest problem I feel that still exists today. If we were to remove the people that are terrified of Terminator and replace them with people that see it for the fact that it's actually a tool. It's a unbelievably powerful tool, right? And we started to replace that. We're going to see a lot faster, turnaround. But I mean, there's still big contractors out there that aren't, they're not adapting anytime soon, right? And in their world, it's they ran a good business. It's all good, but maybe you could speak on where do you see that divide coming in, and like who's going to win from all of this? What is the ideal mindset to take moving into the future with AI? Like speak from an estimating point of view. It's simple for me to understand, not so simple for everybody else though.
It's going to be on that lessons applied side of things, and it is going to be on the they're just aren't enough estimators, like you've already said.
Right.
So estimators are being driven to do more with far less. And
Right.
this is where, by sheer necessity, you're going to have to be able to identify the core project to go after much faster,
Mhm.
because like you said, there's going to be more work out there than you can,
Yeah, there already is.
really. Yeah, there already is. There is so much work out there. The fundamental problem we're having right now is the people going after the work don't necessarily appreciate what they're buying into because they haven't been trained in estimating.
Mhm.
These contractors, a good chunk of them are tradespeople who were really, really well trained at school, can build awesome things, but were never once taught a single blessed thing about business.
Right.
And, they're running into this whole concept of estimating, thinking, I got paid $35 an hour at my last job. So, I'll throw 10% on that, call my rate $38 an hour. And look, I'm making money here. And then they get their first bill from, the IRS, CRA, all those people for, all the taxes they owe, and they're bankrupt. And it was just, they were literally never told what a burden was on labor.
Right.
They were never told what these things were.
Those are the pains that he's hitting them.
Yeah. So that's really where these things are going to become a little more automated in the future. I'd like to say a lot more automated, to be honest. The sheer grind of quantifying, like when you go through and you look at what it takes to put together a quantification of a massive drawing set, like, a high-rise building with 60 stories, that is a monstrous investment of labor. And a lot of that is around simply counting things.
Right.
Even just the typicals, yeah.
And we're leaving that to human error.
And being able to generate what the information that's missing from the drawing. So this is much bigger in the MEP space. But we've all been saying that 3D modeling is going to eliminate the estimate by the next 2 years, and they've been saying that for at least 20 years now.
Right.
So, and part of the challenge with that is there's no time invested in the 3D models outside of for design intent.
Right.
And so the architect invests a phenomenal amount of time in making a building that the owner loves, because that's literally what gets the project going. When the owner looks at this and the architect has, gone through 20 renditions and it went from a square, 20 stories to this like really cool, funky, twisted shape and all this kind of stuff over the course of a couple of years. And then they say, oh, yeah, now we have to power and throw some mechanical in there. Like, yeah, we got somebody for that. They pass it over to the engineer who is given like 2 weeks to power up and, put all the plumbing. By the way, running plumbing through a twist, that's no small feat. So it's one of those things where by the time that hits the street, it's a whole bunch of lines on 2D cuts because they didn't even have time to go put it in Revit properly. Mm-hmm. And so by the time you're done, it's standard details that were copied and pasted from 5 other projects that have no application here. And I've literally in my career received this. And I in one of the bids that I was working on a police station, and they sent the 3D model over. And I literally opened up the 3D model. And this was stuff you couldn't see on the 2D, but you could clearly see they had literally just taken all the HVAC and slapped it down on the model to get it to show up in the 2D, so that, because it all stuck out of the building in the 3D model. Like, you can't physically build this thing.
Yeah.
How did you let this out the door? And 3D, VDC is huge for that risk mitigation, but there just isn't enough time at the front end to capture.
It's not practical yet.
If you're in progressive design build, if you're in design build, phenomenal application there. Oh man, no, I've been on some really, really phenomenal applications of this in those kind of projects because you're given more time frame. Yes. You have to, even more so than any other point in construction, you have to know what you're getting into because, design build, you are literally given nothing. Except the owner says, I want a building there.
Right. And I want it in 1 year's time.
No problem. And then there's that aspect. I did a warehouse for a company named after a river in South America, and it was all it was basically all design build, and it was a monstrous warehouse. And when we started to load stuff in, it was hilarious how little you could fit in this monstrous warehouse. Um, and like the sprinkler was not designed at all when the project was let out. And then that turned into a monstrous driver, but we managed to turn the project into a major success because we had a wicked VDC team on that. Um, the company I was working for, I had convinced them to get 3D scanners so that we could go out to the site, scan the site, backload that into the 3D model, guarantee that everything was being built per the 3D model,
Very
adjust if it wasn't working. And it was only that saved us because we were able to go back to the GC, and the GC initially was like, no, that's a waste. I'm like, guys, it's like running an open-ended schedule. If you don't backfeed it, you're going to screw up royally. And sure enough, there's a few places where beams were just a couple inches out, but we're talking where half an inch mattered on whether that duct work, everything fit in. And so we were able to head off those problems about 6 weeks ahead of them becoming showstoppers on the site. And it worked out so well after the first time that the GC stepped in and said, okay, we're taking this over. They went and got their own 3D scanners and started getting ahead because they were really upset that one of their subtrades got ahead of them. And so it was a fantastic success on getting those like weekly scans overlaid on the model, understand what that meant, and then honestly go back and cross-check it to the estimate. Like, does this make sense?
How often does that happen? Then we just get married and change our orders.
Literally never.
Yeah.
But like technology in construction is just going wild right now. One of my favorite projects was design build. It happened in way northern Canada. It was a water treatment plant, and it was during COVID, and we couldn't even go to the site. So I managed to get permission to go there once, and I brought one of these 3D scanners. I trained the superintendent on how to use it, and then he would send weekly 3D scans back so that we could walk the site and we could see everything. And we took 3D scans before they poured the concrete, which turned out to be a massive lifesaver. I had it when I talked to the superintendent. I'm like, make sure you scan that thing the day before they pour the concrete. And he's like, why on earth would I waste my time doing that? I'm like, just do it, man. It's going to save us. And he's like, why? I'm like, I can't tell you why. I just know it will. And sure enough, 6 months later, I get the call back, and he's like, we have to cut a hole in the floor, and we don't know where the stuff is in there. I'm like, oh, but we do. Load up the 3D scan over the model, and it was just like an X-ray.
That's so awesome.
And I'm like, I can tell you if you move it 6 inches to the left, there is nothing there. And so he was able to go, and they were able to do this. And he's like, you just saved us about $80,000 getting an X-ray crew out here to do this. I'm like, that is why we 3D scan everything.
Just had to force
you talk about the data. It's just, like you talk about the data that generates and how you can tie all that back. I mean, it's a monumental task, but it's inevitable. And it's going to revolutionize things.
For sure. So I'll share a quick story with you and how we're using it practically. We're a subtrade as well. First of all, obviously in the estimating, that's come leaps and bounds, even pre-AI, like what's available now. Anyone using paper and pen, just stop. The learning curve to go to. I mean, again, take the most primitive, Bluebeam or any of those guys. Like the message that we need to be here and be clear about is it saves you thousands of hours. I still talk to contractors daily that are still using paper plans, and you cannot possibly be productive doing that. Number one, full stop right there. Okay. Now, again, let's go one stage further, and I'll share a quick story. We just finished a massive church, and actually before that we did a what do they call them? A spa. I don't know if you've ever worked with those big Nordic spas. And it was a cooperative project, meaning they didn't have the plans ready when they started building. So it was, when I say cooperative, there was 196 change work orders in just my scope alone, which we had 10 different roofs. I've never heard of such a thing. It was almost daily. And it was exactly what you're explaining here. They had no
Yeah.
clue. Nothing lines up. I replaced the whole roof on this place. I'm not exaggerating. I've got the scars to prove it. I replaced the entire roof. We figured 1.5 times. So you can imagine the owners of that were quite upset about the expense that project ended up blooming into. Versus, we just finished another big project with a church. On that project, we did the first time that, just playing around with this stuff. We took all the plans, all the specifications, a big, massive manual, and we dumped it into an AI that basically could regurgitate the information when we asked them questions. All right, that was like basically on the thing. Now we knew going into it that there was 3 major change work orders we were going to get paid on. One was like this inlay gutter system that they hadn't properly spec'd. So like I knew anyone that looked at those drawings and priced off that, they wouldn't even be in the ballpark, right? We also knew it wasn't plumbed, all that kind of stuff. So we kind of had that in our pocket. The second thing we knew is on a day-to-day basis, we knew that these things were coming up, and we would inform and tell the contractor, hey, this XYZ is going to happen. This XYZ is going to happen.
Yeah.
And obviously, towards the end, these things start happening. For one, and the first rule, I guess, of general contracting is to put everything on everyone else. So, no change work order for this whole inlaid gutter system that, was an obvious problem. We pulled back all the data from the AI and created an actual day-by-day printout with our photos, with everything. And it stopped because it started off with, we're gonna sue. All right, started off there as that conversation, as this is on you. And within, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 hours of that conversation, we used our AI to pull back everything, including conversations we had. We had emails, we had texts, we had everything. Where, again, as a subcontractor in a project so complicated as that, zero chance that anyone's just go back. And that's where these things end up in court. That's where they end up, and you lose in court because you don't have that backed up data. You don't have, he said this on this date. This was decided. This was discussed. This was and we were able to pull that all into a report, produce it nicely for the contractor, and reverse it to, now you're going to give us $85,000 for the mistake you made, not us. And, take it or leave it. So again, talk about reducing risk and avoiding problems. Just something simple like that. I mean, I keep telling guys, don't sleep on this stuff. I mean, how many of your top, and I'm talking for the subs, how many of them are running these jobs with really good tradesmen that are the worst communicators in the world?
Yeah.
Right? And then they're pairing them up with guys that, again, you've got these guys that are coming that are well educated, and they know GCs are very good at manipulating and getting things in the way they want it, right? And you're constantly playing that battle. I think that, just in the immediate, how do I get a win out of this thing today? Use it for that purpose. Use it just to update your day-to-day work reports. Use it to upload all the information from your job, all those specs. That way you could just ask, hey, tell me, was the plumbing spec included in here? Yeah, oh yeah, here it is. Just, it's the time saver there is, I mean, you can't sleep on that. And then try and compete with someone with that kind of stuff when they're armed on the job site. Good luck. You're going to get destroyed every time.
You got to get these systems installed into your business.
And they're not complicated. At that level, it's very, I'm not a programmer. I'm not, none of that kind of stuff. But we were able to use it in that practical application. That's basically available for everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So we've gone a bit over time. So thank you for spending all this time with us. Maybe we should, explain how we can get in touch with you and how people can demo your software.
Yeah, for sure. So patabit.com is our website. My email address is melvin@patabit.com. You're always welcome to shoot me an email. And yeah, we have a completely free, no credit card, 2-week trial of our platform. Especially if you're in the MEP space, you're welcome to come and give it a kick at the can. And our team is actually here to help you over some of that learning curve. There is always a learning curve. This software is not like Microsoft Word or Excel that you grew up with. This is, estimating. And so we're here to make it as easy as possible to get you going on that and get your companies in a better place for the front end of the business here. So yeah, that's really, reach out.
Awesome. Melvin, it was really great having you. This is a fantastic discussion. We went through a lot of stuff. Jay, I don't know if there's anything you want to say before we sign off.
That is all as we can go. I could keep going, but I don't think our audience.
Yeah, that's
oh man, we could really start to nerd out.
Once you pull the string on Jay, it'll definitely keep going. All valuable stuff, though. I'll give you that.
Absolutely.
Jay, Johnny, thank you so much for having me here, guys. This has been an absolute blast, and let's go change the industry because it needs it.
I love it. Your sign off is better than mine. Have a great day, guys.